I should be sipping Aperol spritzes on a sun-drenched patio in Santorini right now. The Aegean Sea should be sparkling in front of me. The whitewashed buildings a dazzling contrast to the deep blue. I should be feeling the sun on my skin, the gentle breeze in my hair, and the warm, comforting presence of him next to me. Instead, I'm staring at a blinking cursor on my laptop screen, trying to make sense of the wreckage of my life. My honeymoon should be starting today. My marriage ended a week ago. My name is Evelyn, and I was supposed to marry Julian, 28, last Saturday. We'd been together for 3 years, and honestly, those years were good. Really good. Not perfect, no relationship is, but solid, loving, and filled with the kind of quiet, comfortable joy that I thought would last forever. That's the thing about trust, isn't it? You build it brick by brick, carefully laying each one, ensuring the foundation is strong. And then someone comes along and, with one swift kick, demolishes the whole damn thing. Maybe I'm being dramatic. Maybe I'm overreacting. That's what Julian says anyway. He calls it an innocent joke, a harmless prank. Let me tell you about this innocent joke. Back in high school, there was this guy named Kyle. Kyle was a force of nature, a destructive, malevolent force of nature. He was the star quarterback, the golden boy, the kid who could do no wrong. Except he did wrong. He did a lot of wrong. He was a bully. Plain and simple. And not the kind of playground bully who steals your lunch money. He was insidious, cruel, and methodical. He targeted anyone he deemed different, weak, or weird. And, unfortunately, I fit the bill. Now, I know what you're thinking. Oh, here we go! Another sob story about high school trauma. And yeah, maybe it is. But high school was traumatic. It was a formative experience that shaped who I am today. And Kyle, in particular, left a scar that I thought had faded but clearly hasn't. There's a tendency these days to try and humanize villains, to find some tragic backstory that justifies their behavior. I've seen it in movies, in books, even in real life. But let me tell you, Kyle didn't have one. His parents were rich, loving, and supportive. He had everything handed to him on a silver platter. He was just mean. He seemed to revel in making other people miserable. It was like he fed off of it. Honestly, some of the things he did should have landed him in juvenile detention. He was vicious. The problem was, his father was the mayor. We lived in a small town where the mayor held sway over everything. So, Kyle was untouchable. He could get away with anything. Everyone knew he was a bully. Everyone saw what he was doing. But nobody dared to stand up to him. Not the teachers, not the other students, not even the principal. I tried. Oh God, I tried. One day, I finally reached my breaking point. I went to the principal's office, tears streaming down my face, and told him everything. Every humiliating insult, every cruel prank, every instance of Kyle making my life a living hell. He patted my hand, gave me a sympathetic smile, and promised he'd look into it. A month went by. Nothing. Kyle's reign of terror continued. I knew the principal hadn't done a damn thing. So I went back. This time, I brought my dad. My dad, a man who doesn't take kindly to injustice, especially when it's directed at his daughter. My dad didn't yell or scream. He didn't make a scene. He just calmly and firmly insisted that the principal file a written complaint. He wanted it on record. At the time, I didn't fully understand why. I just wanted the bullying to stop. Now, I get it. My dad knew that if we tried to escalate things outside of the school, the principal could simply deny that I had ever come to him. My dad made sure there was a paper trail, something that couldn't be swept under the rug. Things escalated. Kyle was called into the office. His father was summoned. The mayor didn't show. Too busy, I guess, running the town and protecting his precious son. The next day, they called Kyle's mother. She didn't show either. This happened 3 times. Neither parent ever bothered to show up. In the end, All that happened was the principal gave Kyle a verbal warning, a slap on the wrist. He told him that his behavior was unacceptable and that if it continued, the school would be forced to take action. Everyone knew the school wouldn't take action. More importantly, Kyle knew it. He was untouchable. He was invincible. That was the moment things went from bad to worse. The bullying escalated exponentially. Before, it had been mostly insults and name-calling. Now, it turned into elaborate, twisted pranks. He bribed the cafeteria worker to put a cockroach in my lunch. He put gum on my usual classroom seat, ruining my favorite pair of jeans. He locked me in the girls' bathroom during lunch hour. He was clever about it. He never physically assaulted me. He never verbally threatened me, at least. Not directly. He just resorted to this twisted psychological torture that, for some reason, was hilarious to everyone in his circle. Every time I tried to complain, people told me to lighten up. They said I was a buzzkill, that I had no sense of humor. They said I was overreacting. The whole experience was utterly soul-crushing, and even though it happened over a decade ago, I still have nightmares about it. Sometimes I wake up in a cold sweat, my heart pounding, the sound of Kyle's laughter ringing in my ears. I hate him. I hate him with every fiber of my being. There's no way I'll ever forgive him, even if he's changed, which, according to some people, he has. I don't care. I don't owe him forgiveness, and I will never forgive him. Kyle became a part of my past, a part that I buried deep the moment I left for college. I moved to another state, put as much distance as possible between myself and that town. I graduated, got a job, and built a life for myself, far away from the shadow of Kyle's cruelty. I've never had any direct contact with him since then. We have a few mutual friends on social media, so I occasionally see him in group photos. But that's the extent of it. For me, the chapter on Kyle closed the moment I left high school, and although I'm still traumatized by what he put me through, I've tried to mentally leave those memories and that part of my life behind. Then I met Julian. About 3 years ago, I swiped right. Corny, I know, but he had a kind face, an easy smile, and a profile that suggested a shared love of hiking and bad puns. We connected quickly. He was charming, funny, and genuinely interested in getting to know me. He listened to my stories, laughed at my jokes, and made me feel like I was the most amazing woman in the world. 6 months into our relationship, he tried to pull a funny prank on me. He was the self-proclaimed prankster of his group of friends, the guy who always had a trick up his sleeve, the one who lived to catch people off guard. I had noticed this in the first few weeks of our relationship. He'd hide my keys, or change my phone's ringtone to something ridiculous, or put salt in my coffee. Harmless stuff, maybe. Annoying, definitely. I made it very clear, very early on, that I didn't like pranks. I explained that they triggered bad memories for me. I told him about Kyle, about the relentless bullying, about the lasting impact it had had on my life. He seemed to understand. He apologized for the salt in the coffee incident and promised he wouldn't do it again. He said he respected my feelings and that he would never intentionally do anything to hurt me. I believed him. I wanted to believe him. 6 months later, he tried to prank me again. He'd planned some elaborate scheme involving a fake kidnapping and a ransom note written in glitter glue. I found out about it beforehand, thanks to a mutual friend who thought it was a terrible idea. I confronted him. We had the biggest fight of our relationship. I was this close to breaking up with him. I told him that if he couldn't respect such a basic request from me, then I had nothing left to say. I told him he could do whatever he wanted, but I wasn't going to stay in that relationship. It was an ugly fight. He said I was being unreasonable, that it wasn't a big deal, and that I needed to develop a sense of humor. He said I was taking things too seriously, that I was overreacting. Things got even worse. I started having horrible flashbacks from high school. I saw Kyle's face, heard his voice, felt the familiar wave of anxiety wash over me. That was when I broke down. I told him everything. I recounted the details of Kyle's bullying, the years of torment, the lasting damage. I told him about the nightmares, the anxiety, the fear that still lingered beneath the surface. He went silent for a moment. His face softened. He looked genuinely contrite. He apologized. Sincerely. He said he had no idea what I had been through and that he was very sorry. He said he understood why I hated pranks and that he would never do anything like that again. He seemed genuine. I wanted to believe him. I thought I should give him the benefit of the doubt, since he didn't know about my trauma. That was 2.5 years ago. He never pranked me again. Not even once. Until the day of our wedding. Honestly, I had completely forgotten about that incident. It felt like a distant memory. A blip on the radar of our otherwise happy relationship. I know it was a huge fight, but we resolved things. He seemed truly remorseful. We moved past it. Fast forward to last Saturday, the day I was supposed to become Mrs. Julian Hawthorne. Everything was going well. It was a small, intimate ceremony that we had planned with our closest friends and family. The venue was beautiful. The flowers were perfect, and I felt like the luckiest woman in the world. Julian had mentioned a few weeks ago that he had invited a special guest to the wedding. I didn't think much of it. I figured it was his grandmother, whom I adore. She's a sweetheart, but had told us she wouldn't be able to make it due to travel complications. I figured he had somehow managed to convince her to come after all. It was half an hour before I was supposed to walk down the aisle. A million things were running through my mind. Excitement, nervousness, anticipation. I tried calling Eloise, my maid of honor. The call wouldn't go through. I got a little nervous, calmed myself, and then called Samantha, one of my bridesmaids. Same thing. The call wouldn't go through. I tried Nia, another bridesmaid, and got the same result. At this point, alarm bells were ringing in my head. Something was wrong. Terribly wrong. I called Jonah, Julian's best man. He told me he couldn't see anyone from my bridal party, essentially the bridesmaids and my maid of honor, and that he was about to call me to see if everything was okay. I asked my mom, who was with me at that moment, to call my dad to find out what was happening. She came back completely shaken. She said that no one had any idea where the girls were. I was hyperventilating, genuinely terrified. I couldn't reach anyone. I asked Jonah not to tell Julian. I didn't want to worry him. What I didn't know was that this was his plan all along. I tried sneaking into the wedding hall to figure out what was happening, to find my friends, to understand why they were suddenly missing. And that's when I saw him. Kyle was standing at the entrance. I don't remember anything else, just the sight of him, his smirking face, his cold, calculating eyes. I gasped. I collapsed to the ground. I was completely frozen. I couldn't move my body. Some people had to carry me away. There was a lot of commotion in the following minutes. People were whispering, murmuring, trying to figure out what was going on. I vaguely remember Julian approaching me. He was worried, I'll admit that. He knelt beside me, took my hand, and asked me what was wrong. When I finally recovered, I don't even know how much time had passed. He started laughing. He actually laughed. He said I should have seen my face. He said it was the best prank he had ever pulled. I looked at him in disbelief. I couldn't comprehend what he was saying. How could he be laughing? How could he think this was funny? By then, my maid of honor and the bridesmaids had arrived. They looked disheveled, confused, and angry. I asked them where they had been. They said they had been locked in a room. Someone had lured them there under the guise of needing help with a surprise for me, and then locked the door. They couldn't use their phones because Julian had confiscated them for the surprise. Kyle was the one who locked them in. I spoke with Eloise. She has been my friend since kindergarten. She knows everything about me, including everything about Kyle. I asked her why he was there. She told me that Kyle was the special guest Julian had mentioned. Even at that moment, I didn't understand. It was like My brain couldn't process the information. It was too surreal, too twisted, too cruel. I asked everyone to leave. I told Julian I wanted to talk to him. Alone. He said we could talk after the ceremony, because it was already getting late. He acted like nothing was wrong, like I was being difficult and needed to just get over it so we could get married. I asked him why Kyle was there. The thing is, he knew who Kyle was. I had shown him pictures from high school. I had told him stories. He knew exactly who he was. Apparently, Kyle got a job in the same office building as Julian a few months ago. They really hit it off. Shared a similar sense of humor, Julian said. Bonded over their love of pranks. When Kyle found out that I was Julian's fiancé, he was thrilled. Because he thought that since we had a friendly history together, things would be even better. Friendly history? I practically screamed. I asked Julian why he encouraged Kyle, why he even befriended him. His response was that Kyle had actually told him the truth about what had happened in high school. According to Kyle, he wasn't a bully. He was just a prankster. And I, apparently, used to be very sensitive. That's why Julian decided it would be best for Kyle to come to the wedding. So we could make peace. So we could bury the hatchet. I was too stunned to speak. I felt like I was in a nightmare. Like I was trapped in some kind of alternate reality where everything was distorted and wrong. I don't know what happened to me. I just snapped. I took off my ring. The beautiful, sparkling diamond that he had slipped onto my finger just a few months earlier. The symbol of our love, our commitment, our future. I handed it to him. I told him we were done. I said that there would be no wedding. Everything went to hell. I left. I announced that the wedding was canceled. I thanked everyone for coming. I left with my family. I really don't know how my friends handled the mess after that. They just told people I was sick and would be okay. I knew they were trying to protect me, but I was humiliated. That was last week. Julian has gone crazy. He has been bombarding my phone with texts and calls. He has been calling my parents' phones. He has even been messaging my friends. I've simply ignored him. I've been in no contact these past few days. I can't even think straight. To make matters worse, he has been slandering me all over social media, saying things like I couldn't handle a single joke, that I was rude, that I ruined the most magical day of his life. It's a mess. I really don't know how I got into this situation. Things were perfect between us. It wasn't supposed to be like this. I don't know what led him to pull that prank. I don't even know what led me to make that decision. I saw Kyle. Everything came rushing back. The fear, the humiliation, the anger. It was all there, raw and visceral, as if no time had passed at all. I think that even at that moment, I hadn't thought about canceling the wedding. I was angry, yes. Hurt, definitely. But I might have been able to find a way to forgive him. But then, I heard Julian's excuse, his justification for what he did. I simply lost control. I couldn't believe that the man who had known me for so long, whom I had trusted, and to whom I had shared the most traumatic part of my life, suddenly decided to believe my abuser over me. He had no reason to do it. He hadn't even told me that Kyle worked in the same building. To me, even associating with him was wrong. But maybe I'm overreacting. Maybe I'm being dramatic. Because on social media, Julian has been painting me as the villain. And, surprisingly, a lot of people are buying it. Everyone is saying that I was too dramatic about it. That it was silly to throw away 3 years over a stupid joke. That I should have been more understanding, more forgiving. My parents and friends support me. They say I did the right thing. But they also say that eventually, I'll have to talk to Julian, that I can't avoid it forever. I'm doubting my own decision right now. Maybe everyone else is right. Maybe I could have handled it differently. Even if I was upset, I could have resolved everything another way. Instead of choosing to go nuclear. Was I too hasty? Too emotional? I honestly don't know. I should be in Greece right now, with the man I thought was the love of my life. I finally had some time to think about what happened, why I reacted the way I did. It wasn't easy, but I knew I had to do it. I needed to dissect the mess, understand the root of my anger, and figure out if I had, in fact, made the right decision. I also went through every single comment you guys left on my last post. All the support, advice, and sometimes brutally honest opinions. I didn't reply to all of them, but I read them all. Every single one. Honestly, I'm so grateful for you all. I was hesitant to turn to Reddit at first. It felt so vulnerable. But you've opened my eyes to so many things I was willing to ignore because I loved Julian. I didn't even realize how bad it was. How degrading and insulting it was for me as his partner to have my trauma minimized and weaponized. I was so busy trying to be understanding and supportive that I lost sight of my own worth. To everyone who pointed out that Julian was a massive jerk, thank you! Even though he had been great most of the time, this one act cancels out anything. The funniest thing is that, since I still haven't spoken to him about what happened on our wedding day, besides the screaming, he keeps talking nonsense about me in public. He's acting like everything is my fault, like I'm some crazy, unreasonable bridezilla who ruined his life over a harmless joke. But in private, he's been begging me to talk to him, sending me tearful texts and voicemails, promising he'll do anything to make things right. I wanted to end the drama, if only for a moment, so I went to see him yesterday. He wanted to come to my house, but I told him I'd only be willing to meet in a public place. Neutral ground, you know? We met at a cafe. The meeting was pretty bad. To put it simply, I had hoped, stupidly, I admit, that he would at least have some remorse. That he would have used this time to reflect and understand why I reacted the way I did. That he would have come to the realization that what he did was profoundly wrong and deeply hurtful. But no! He was the same arrogant person as always, and I had had enough of him. He started by saying that I had overreacted and embarrassed him in front of everyone. He also said that it wasn't such a serious prank, and that it certainly didn't justify such an exaggerated reaction. I let him talk as much as he wanted. I listened to his excuses, his justifications, his attempts to minimize his actions and blame me for the fallout. And then I dismantled his argument piece by piece. I told him that the fact that he even invited Kyle to the wedding was beyond bizarre. Why on earth would you bring my abuser to the day that was supposed to be the most special of my life? He had the audacity to mock me, to say, in a sarcastic tone, "Oh yes, I know what a big, bad abuser he was." Never in my life did I imagine that he would stoop to this level, to say something so cruel, so dismissive, so utterly devoid of empathy. It took all the strength I had not to jump across the table and slap him in the face. I told him that if he believed a complete stranger over me, the woman he wanted to marry, then I had nothing, absolutely nothing left to say to him, and that I was glad I had canceled the wedding. He looked annoyed by all of this, like I was ruining his day by being mad at him. He was still treating the situation like a minor fight, not a breakup. He said I was looking for drama, that I needed to calm down and talk logically. I told him there was nothing left to talk about between us. We saw this completely differently. Besides, he chose to believe my abuser. Invited him to the wedding for what? Cheap laughs? No one found it funny except him. It wasn't even a good prank. It was just cruel. Then he said something even more out of line. Something that solidified my decision to walk away. He said he was willing to forgive me, to take me back, despite my silly antics. But I needed to publicly admit that I had been wrong. I needed to apologize for overreacting and causing a scene. He kept insisting that I needed to stop taking all of this so seriously, that I was ruining everything over a minor misunderstanding. I had had enough. He was being an idiot. A self-centered, insensitive, arrogant idiot, and I had no interest in continuing the conversation with him. I simply told him that we could divide our belongings and end this so we could move on with our lives. His attitude changed in an instant. He looked like I had punched him in the gut. It was honestly pathetic to watch. He started begging me to reconsider, saying he had made a mistake, promising he would never do anything like that again. The change was disgusting, because I knew it wasn't genuine. It was just a performance, an attempt to manipulate me into taking him back. I told him that if he was only now realizing how serious this was, then he was an immature child, that he should have thought about the consequences of his actions before inviting Kyle to our wedding, before invalidating my trauma, before choosing to believe my abuser over me. I told him we were done, that I was not going to reconcile with him, that I deserved better than someone who would treat me with such blatant disrespect. He begged me to sit down and talk more, like adults, but I had already said everything I needed to say. I left the cafe. I felt a little better, a little stronger, a little more sure of myself. Still, he kept texting me, apologizing, saying he now realized he was wrong. Of course, now he realizes it. What's the point of realizing it now? He never should have pulled that prank, especially not at my wedding. Now it's useless for him to realize things. And honestly, I don't even believe he's sincere. It's not easy to go from being about to marry someone you've been with for 3 years, someone you planned a future with, to suddenly ending it all. But at the same time, not a single part of me, not my mind, not my body, wants to be with him. He made sure of that by working so hard to make me lose all respect for him. And for me, there's no coming back from that. So yeah, there go 3 years. There goes everything else. But at least I can sleep at night knowing that I made the right decision for myself, that I chose my own well-being over a relationship that had become toxic and damaging. I followed the advice of many of you here and decided to clear things up myself, not in a vindictive, revenge-fueled way, but in a clear, factual, and honest way. After my meeting with Julian, he acted clingy and desperate for a few days. He was constantly texting, calling, and emailing, begging me to reconsider. Then, he disappeared completely. Radio silence. I thought maybe he had finally understood that our relationship was over for good, that common sense had prevailed, that he had finally accepted responsibility for his actions. I was wrong. So very, very wrong. I got a frantic call from Eloise. She told me that Julian had posted a long, rambling, emotionally charged story on both Facebook and Instagram for the whole world to see. It was a very one-sided, malicious attempt to gain sympathy and portray me as the villain. My level of respect for him dropped into the negatives after reading what he wrote. Basically, he called me all sorts of names. He said I was controlling, jealous, and insecure. He said I couldn't handle a joke and that I was ruining his life. He said I was overreacting and that he was the victim of my unstable emotions. He tried to paint me as a bad, crazy, controlling partner, writing things like how I had always been like this and that he had to cut ties with friends and acquaintances because of me. That never happened. He always made it clear he liked his friends and made me feel bad for not connecting with them on the same level. He tried to portray me as a toxic woman who had problems with anyone who wasn't me, to the point that I was insecure about a friend he made at work. And the worst part, according to him, was that the friend was a man, so there was no chance of anything happening between them. I should have been okay with them being friends. It was just harmless. He pretended to be all good and submissive in the post, saying he would have understood, even given in, if the friend had been a woman. But since I was acting this way over a male friend, to the point of canceling the wedding and refusing to reconcile, it showed that I was selfish, insecure, and narcissistic. He threw together any buzzword he could find and tried to smear me in the worst possible way. He had to say he was blindsided by this, as if I hadn't already made it clear I didn't like pranks. I never thought he could stoop this low, but he proved me wrong. Once again, I knew I had to do something to control the damage. This was getting completely out of hand. It was time for me to go on the offensive, or he would just make everything he did seem justified and turn himself into the victim of the whole situation. It took me an entire day to organize my thoughts and write my response. I wanted to be calm, collected, and factual. I didn't want to sink to his level. The post is too long to copy here, but it really just says what I already mentioned in my original post. I explained my history with Kyle, the bullying I endured, and the lasting impact it had on my life. I made sure to include the part where I explained how I was harassed by his new friend in school and how I had told him early in our relationship that I had an aversion to these kinds of pranks. I didn't mince words. I didn't try to be nice about it, but I also didn't lie. Every word I put out there for the world to see was the truth, and that was exactly what Julian couldn't handle. To say the post blew up would be an understatement. It went viral. People were sharing it, commenting on it, and tagging their friends. All the people who were crying over how angelic Julian was and comforting him were now flooding my messages with apologies and trying to make amends. I was bombarded with texts and calls. Surprisingly, none from Julian. I only received one message from him the next day, calling me a stupid expletive, and that was it. Then I blocked his number, because I don't need him in my life. And I certainly don't need more of this drama. The surprising part was that his mother reached out to me. I've always liked her. She's a nice woman, although we haven't interacted enough to consider ourselves close. She told me she had heard a very different story from Julian. She regretted not asking me first. She said she had believed her son and now realized that was a mistake. She apologized on his behalf. I told her she didn't have to. Of all the people who reached out to me, her apology and message felt the most genuine, and she didn't even have to apologize. To be honest, it wasn't her fault. It was his. He's a grown man who makes his own decisions. In this case, very bad decisions. Thankfully, I haven't heard anything from Kyle, and I know I won't. If he still had the audacity to show up in front of me and pull that stupid prank on my wedding day, I can pretty accurately estimate how much he has matured over the years. 0. The narrative has now changed. People are boycotting Julian, not only for being an idiot, but also for lying, especially to gain sympathy points on social media and support from strangers on the internet. It's sad how things turned out for him. It's also sad for me, because the adrenaline from all this drama will fade soon. And I fear that, because that's when I'll have to face reality. It's not something that can be avoided. And now, I think it's time to rip off the Band-Aid. I've spent too long either swimming or drowning in this damn mess. It's time to get out of it. I owe it to myself, to my parents, and to my friends who have stood by me through all of this. I'm going on a trip. I know, it sounds crazy, but hear me out. Julian and I had originally planned to go on a honeymoon after the wedding. Obviously, that's not happening anymore. But I spent a considerable amount of money on the reservations. Flights, hotels, excursions. It was all booked and paid for. So I thought, why not? I'm going on a solo trip to Southeast Asia. I know, it sounds cliché. Eat, pray, love, you know? But honestly, I need a break. I need to get away from the drama, the heartbreak, the constant reminders of what I lost. After being in a relationship for 3 years, I need to reset. And more importantly, rediscover how to do things on my own. I haven't had any contact with him now, which makes me feel really relieved. The tickets were flexible, so I was able to change them. As for the hotel bookings, I was able to cancel some and not others. But at least I got back part of what I had invested in the trip. I know it might sound strange to many of you. To go on a trip that was originally planned as a honeymoon, to travel alone after experiencing such a devastating breakup. But I need this. I need this trip to get back on track and clear my mind. The situation isn't ideal, but I need to learn how to make the best of it. To embrace the unknown, to challenge myself, to remind myself that I am strong, capable, and worthy of happiness, even without Julian. For those who asked how my trip went, the answer is, it was amazing. Life-changing even. I had never traveled alone before, let alone abroad. I was nervous, scared, and unsure of myself. But it didn't feel so bad after all. I met so many incredible people along the way. Other travelers, locals, people from all walks of life. I joined 2 other girls who were also traveling through Asia. They were from Germany and Australia. We got to share part of our journey together. We explored ancient temples, hiked through lush jungles, and swam in crystal clear waters. I tried new foods, learned new languages, and experienced new cultures. I pushed myself outside of my comfort zone and discovered a strength and resilience that I didn't know I possessed. In these months since returning from my trip, I've discovered something. You guys have to have well-connected friends if you want top-tier gossip. Thanks to my bridesmaids, that's exactly what I've gotten. For starters, I haven't had any further contact with Julian. Our last interaction was that message where he called me stupid, and that was it. He's been blocked, and he hasn't tried to reach out in any other way. But let's talk about his life and the things I found out, especially concerning his best friend, Kyle. Can you guess who Kyle played a prank on? Yes! Julian himself. And it wasn't a fun prank. Not even remotely appropriate for their age. Or for anyone. Apparently, Aaron thought it would be absolutely hilarious to fill balloons with water and colored dye and throw them at Julian before he went into work. Well, it was hilarious for everyone except Julian. Duncan was already under a lot of stress that day because he had to meet with a client. Showing up with wet, pink-stained pants wasn't exactly professional. His boss got mad at him for it, even though Julian tried to explain. Now, he's on thin ice at work. Duncan told his boss that his friend had played a prank on him, but his boss asked what kind of friend plays a prank like that on you. Well, Julian and Kyle aren't as close as they used to be anymore. Imagine. The only relationship Julian had valued breaking down due to pranks. I don't know why Julian is being such a buzzkill and uptight about this. He loved pranks. He should be laughing along with his friend and buying him a beer to celebrate the hilarious prank he pulled on him. Sarcasm aside, I do feel vindicated seeing the karma hit Julian so hard. He didn't value my pain and the trauma of Kyle's bullying, so it makes me feel slightly better to see Julian experience something similar. In other news, I found out that Julian had doubts about getting married before the wedding. He might be saying this now because he's hurt and wants to change the narrative again, claiming that, in reality, he never wanted to get married after all. Or maybe it's true, and the whole prank situation happened because he's a coward and wanted me to end the relationship for him. The way this information reached me makes me think it's the second option, because it wasn't something he made public. It was something he said in private to someone else, like a confession. I think he knew I wasn't happy and decided to push the envelope so I would leave. This doesn't change anything about what happened, but I couldn't keep this information to myself when so many of you have asked for relevant updates. I hope this serves as a relevant update for you. I also hope you're all having a great life. I know I am. Or at least, my life is far better than it would have been if I had married Julian the prankster. I can just picture him and his ex-best friend, Kyle, pulling pranks non-stop. Just the thought of it makes my stomach turn. It's a good thing I decided to leave when I did. Thank you to all of you for your support and wisdom. I'm better off without Julian.